Okay, so at this point, I'm sure you're thinking, all right, this is great. We got a lot of scientific understanding of the prefrontal cortex. That's a super fascinating story about Davis and getting this immersive experience that then transforms him within a relatively short period of time. And you may say to yourself, well, must be nice. Yeah, of course, go spend 4 months in a tropical rainforest, and I'm sure everyone would be transformed. And you may be right about that. And so the question is, well, what the heck? How can we implement this now? How do we start getting after this as far as taking steps right now? And I'm a two-step kind of person. And so, and if it gets more than that, then my simple mind becomes a little bit overwhelmed. So we're going to break this down into 2 steps, because I do believe that it is not a coincidence that the timing worked out perfectly, where Davis, the day that he decided that he was going back to Washington, happened to just coincide with the day that my dad was going to be trading in his vehicle. And Davis's third and final goal is a vehicle. And I don't even think it's worth trying to figure out how many citations there are in the Bible, but there is a good amount of them that says prayerfully dedicate your desires to the Lord. And I can't help but wonder if, again, if this prefrontal cortex, this God center of our brain, this organ that we have that creates power itself, it has a direct connection with God. And if we can stimulate that part of the brain and to stimulate more power, if that deepens our connection with God, I can't help but ask the question. And because it just seems like there are too many things that are coincidences, especially with Davis and how everything was perfect. So let's break this down on 2 actionable steps. Goal number 1, and I'm going to read this out and then we'll dive into it a little bit. Goal number 1 is to experience more energy within your body, releasing it where it is stuck. Okay, so this is where, for me, rather than focus on, this is my problem, focus on, if you were going to say to yourself, in 1 year from now, this is what I would like my life to be like. And it doesn't matter. That's not, for me, this main program is meant to be clearing the COVID fog and clearing the neuroemotional fog. And so focusing really on being able to have more energy, more clarity, happiness, being on more alignment with your value systems, feel lighter. All those things are really what I'm gearing this main educational series to. But just to get rid of that, what does God whisper on your heart? If only next year this could be a thing. And if you can visualize that, think about where you are stuck with that. So, and what I ask this, so for example, if it's like, I would just like to be able to play with my kids, but you're just exhausted, right? That means that there is energy that is stuck within your body. And so, and it's there. I mean, your brain's producing the same amount of bandwidth. It's just getting used up. And so, and that's what leads to exhaustion. Okay. So, or if it is pain is where energy is stuck within your body and has become toxic. And then thing number 2, feel really good about it. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because as we're going to go through in more detail about this releasing energy process, the releasing of the energy is in essence, it's as if we are making significant changes within our neurodevelopmental structure. And the easiest way to understand that is think about, if you're a parent, think about when you have kids. When you have kids, they go through so many developmental changes. And have you ever noticed that, like, right before they're making a big jump, they would all of a sudden get super, super fussy. And so, like, from crawling to standing, just get super fussy and grumpy. And then all of a sudden, boom, wow, they're walking now. Holy cow, crazy. Or same with learning a new skill set in school. It's like it's super, super fussy, and all of a sudden, boom, they have it. And that's because when the brain is rewiring itself, that is a lot of changes. And that change feels, it feels. And so my kids, they learn these random songs, and they start singing it. So like this, like the song they sing right now, how does it go? When your brain goes numb, you call it mental freeze. That's something that degrees. So I don't know. It goes something like that. When your brain goes numb, you can call it mental freeze. And so when you're adding motion to neurological patterns within your brain, it unfreezes and that numbness goes away. Very similar to starting a new workout program. You work muscles that haven't been used and you feel them intensely. So being able to train yourself to understand that change feels, and it feels different than what is you're used to, which if there's energy stuck there, that is a numb, unfeeling area. So understanding that change is good. No change, no bueno, as they say in the Dominican Republic. And this is probably the hardest part for most people. And I think this goes back to understanding that women are better at processing through emotions and crying and releasing cortisol. Men have a more difficult time. And if we can go back to Davis's story, I mean, he was feeling lots of feelings, and he just became unbearable to be around. and very now, can I reflect back, I can laugh on it, but in the moment, it's like, oh my gosh, so frustrating. But again, same as with having a child that's going through developmental change. They in the chiropractic world, we call it neurological detoxing. They're detoxing off these stuck energy patterns as changes are occurring within their body, and that's the whole point. The whole point is to get unstuck and then start making changes. And for me, how do we accomplish step number 2? If you got a better way than this, I really would like to hear it, because this is a difficult thing for me, is just acknowledging the feeling. For example, one of the goals of this course is to be happy. And sometimes you have to feel not happy in order to then be happy. Feelings versus beings goes back to our first course series of the perception becomes our reality, is having some kind of mantra of, my gosh, I feel XYZ, therefore I must be changing, which makes me be more happy, have more energy, be more aligned, and then also be the light for other people to do the same thing. So then, for going through another evaluation about where is this energy stuck, it's easy when it's within the body. It hurts here, I am exhausted here, and that's quite a bit more simple. However, our brain, again, is constantly being trained in forming associations. If you remember back to the Pavlov's experiment, where Ivan Pavlov brought food into a room, rung a bell, the dog started to salivate, and pretty soon he could condition the bell to create salivation within the dog. So an autonomic response with a non-food item. And so our brains are constantly and continually making these same kind of synapses. This equals this. Bell equals food. No food, bell still equals food. And so for if I could explain, if I could share a little bit about my experience during the pandemic, my fight or flight response got paired with people. And so and this isn't, again, not to get sympathy by any means, but to just explain a simple process that occurs. My mind equivocated people with being angry with me, people with calling me negative phrases, with perception being changed from I'm Dr. Devin, everyone loves Dr. Devin, super positive thing in the community to now I'm Dr. Devin. I'm the harbinger of death and the reason why people are dying of COVID. And of course, now I can smile back on it and look at it and say, well, that was all silly. It wasn't true. However, it was very true to the people. And so right now we're facing a large amount of people that actually feel the opposite, where they see people as harbingers of death. And I mean, I was reading a book by Robert F. Kennedy, The Real Anthony Fauci, and he talked about there's something to the degree of like over 50% of people within the Democratic Party believed if they got COVID, they would be hospitalized and or die. And so that same kind of thing is happening within everyone's mind. There's these associations that have been built. So this is a point where in my book, the Christian Chiropractor's Wild Guide for COVID Recovery, I talk about you spending a week where you simply start to notice where am I becoming drained or becoming, and let's go back to that metric of dim, maybe, right? Or a dimwit. Again, not to call anyone names or make anyone feel negative about themselves, but really to label a negative feeling as the overactive amygdala or that warrior part of the brain that's just exhausting us. And is it in your body with a certain kind of activity? Where in your body is it? Where is it stuck? Where are you feeling those that trapped energy or that pain or when you have an emotional response? For example, a common thing people say is I hold my stress in my shoulders. And the reason for that is because when there's an upregulation of the stress response, there's a downregulation of what's called the spinal accessory nerve, which is a cranial nerve that controls our trapezius muscle. People say, oh gosh, I just need to get a massage. Massages are good, no doubt. However, the reason why the trapezius muscles aren't relaxing isn't because of the muscle. It's because the vagus nerve has been downregulated because of stress, spinal accessory nerve up-regulated. So you got to reset that neurology, which we'll cover in the third course of this, what happens Vegas. And so where is it in the body? With low back, exhausted from sitting, whatever it is, and just simply note it. Just note it, observe it. And then is it in your mind? Is there a repeating thought pattern and of having this person deceived me, lied, around insecurity, around a feeling of I was manipulated in that situation, or again, depressed or insecure or misunderstood. If there's a current scenario that your brain's playing out. And again, understand that this energy, this light bulb worth of energy that we have, it does not realize real life versus inside your mind. If you're having the same conversations over and over inside your mind, that's using up the same amount of energy without an outcome, which we'll cover why that's important. And then relationships. And this is the thing that, I as a Christian, I love and I have a desire to serve everyone. And I also understand that there are plenty of studies now that have shown that we become the 5 people that we spend time with. And so if we are spending time with people that are stuck in this amygdala dim pattern, we will match them. We will mirror them. It's part of our survival mechanism that God created within us. And that will be covered in a good amount of more detail later on as far as source and also the cost of energy for use and also disuse, and also in the job. And this is a big one where I found myself in a really exhausting pattern because my job, I am a doctor of chiropractic, not because I like the status of being a doctor, not because I enjoy the benefit of having a higher economic status because I own a clinic and I have a successful business. I am a doctor of chiropractic because when I was in high school, I was in a rollover car accident where my friend thought it would be super fun to go 55 miles an hour down his driveway. He lost control. He hit an embankment. He put the vehicle into a roll. He didn't have his seatbelt on, but I did. So when we rolled, I reached out, grabbed a hold of him, which then wedged him between me and the seat, pushed me out of the top part of the seatbelt. I went through the side window, and then my face collided with the ground. The emergency vehicles came, and the first responders said, "You need to go to the hospital." But I grew up, did not have dinner poor. And so I knew, like, I am alive right now. And if my parents get a hospital bill, I will no longer be alive. So I refused going to the hospital. But of course, next day, adrenaline wears off. I can barely move. I can't raise my shoulder because I fractured clavicle. And my parents take me to the medical doctor because that's what you do. And that's what a good parent has been trained to do, at least during their generation. I think there's a lot more people that are starting to see that maybe there is better ways that are natural, scripture-based, healthy ways, and that model of putting children on drugs doesn't work. Because I spent the next year taking pain pills, muscle relaxers, smoking significant amounts of marijuana with a significant limp. Part of my face was partially paralyzed, and I had such bad muscle spasms that if I moved any part of me, my body would twitch. So imagine that in high school, right? And so I spent that full year in that status, and every night I would lay in bed and I would just think, like, this is the way that life is going to be. Like, is that even worth living? And then one day, as fate would have it, as God's perfect plan would have it, a person outside the high school gave me a Gideon's Bible, and I had so much frustration, I had so much anger, because I went from an athlete and high levels of energy playing outside in the country with my brothers and my friends to barely able to walk and do anything. And so I had this Gideon Bible, and I ended up looking into it, and I would go to the reference and it'd be like anger, and I look up verses on anger and I'd read it, and it would give me peace. It'd give me a moment of peace. And then it wasn't long after doing that every single day. Of course, I had traumatic brain injuries from the car accident, so my memory was so bad. So I literally had to go back to this Bible every day to get more peace from it, because I couldn't remember. I mean, I ended up going to a specialist that evaluated my neurocognitive ability, and at that time, my short-term memory was like 25% of normal. My long-term was fine, but my problem-solving part of my brain had hypercompensated. It was like 200% compared to normal cognitive power. And the reason it became that way was because after I started going through this Bible every single day, it wasn't long before someone was like, "Why don't you go to a chiropractor?" But again, I didn't think, I was like, why would I go to them? They're not real doctors. Everyone knows they're not real doctors, and the medical doctors don't like them, and they're clearly the smartest people, right? And so, but I'm borderline suicidal every single day. So I think, why not go to a chiropractor? And that first adjustment was the first time that I received hope, because the next day I was just a little bit better than I was before. And so even though that was in my teen years, my life is a significantly different trajectory because of one chiropractor. And we know, looking around at the rate of drug addiction that we now as an epidemic within the United States, like my story could have been quite a bit different. And I was on the road to having a different life and a different story. So the reason why I'm a chiropractor is because I have an obligation to help people connect back with the ability that God gives us to be able to fully heal and then do good for the rest of our lives. And so I was in a job where, I mean, after the pandemic, I did not feel like I was accomplishing that anymore, because the response during the pandemic was so full of inactivity, toxicity, vaccinations, where people were got forced out of their jobs if they didn't get a vaccination that was shown not to prevent the spread of the virus. I mean, that felt like I was not accomplishing the role that God had put in my life. And then my community was right there with this feeling of serving. You know, I previous to the pandemic, we had built a splash pad. We had built a $1.3 million splash pad, a $250,000 park, did a renovation of a community center. And again, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this to now understand what was good in my life. God was no longer showing. I was no longer having fruit through it. And so let it rip was the next thing that had to happen. Committed to getting unstuck and then getting lit up, because when you let that energy free, it is going to light you up. And then shine light on that stuck spot. Okay, so this is the important part. Rip that band-aid off. I was in a position where I'm like, well, I got a business, I'm successful, but again, there was not the fruit that I had experienced up to before the pandemic. And I believe that is a hard part for a lot of people. And it definitely was a hard part for me as I resigned from all the presidential positions that I was in, as I then moved my entire family to the Dominican Republic for initially 5 months. And there's two ways that you can I believe that you can think about this. You can either say, oh, I feel bad for now this change, or again, go back to the original thing of like, I'm having these feelings, that means I must be changing. And again, the main goal is to get unstick that toxic stuck energy in order to then allow God to shine through it. And what does that look like for you? I'm not sure. I don't think I could have predicted the outcomes that Davis had in his life, and I would not dare to limit God in his potential. But I think if you, as we talked about, come up with 3 main goals that you can have as prayers for a year from now, I think God is going to shine so much light where you can look back on these stuck spots that you then went through this painful process of letting it go, and then see how that was a stepping stone to build strength on, and allowing God to, really to work miracles and getting lit up. So, homework assignment for this one, now that we're starting to get a little more engaged as far as out of theory into practical application. Where is it stuck? List it off: body, mind, relationships, job, community. And then what would getting unstuck, ripping that band-aid off, shining light on that stuck spot look like for you? Mine was extreme. Okay. I'm not saying that my journey should be replicated by anyone, because it was a unique one for me. And what God whispered to me was for me. And so, honor what God's whispering to you as far as what needs to happen in order to then get lit up.